So picture a royal dining hall, right? And it is completely overrun by these aggressive, heavily armed men.
Oh, yeah. Absolute chaos.
Exactly. They're, drinking all the wine, slaughtering the livestock, and basically trying to force the queen of the estate into marriage.
Truly the worst house guests imaginable.
Totally. And then suddenly this violent, bloody battle breaks out. I mean, spears are flying everywhere, swords are clashing, and standing shoulder to shoulder with the defending king in this brutal fight to the death is this terrifying, brilliant goddess of war.
Who, importantly, is disguised as a trusted old man.
Yes, disguised as an old man. Now, I want you to imagine taking that exact scene of ultimate ancient carnage and using it to update your LinkedIn profile.
It sounds completely obscured when you frame it that way. I mean, nobody thinks of warfare when they're updating their resume.
But that is exactly what you were doing. Every time you go to work, send a corporate email or update your resume with a word that feels incredibly modern and professional, you might actually be invoking this ancient epic.
You really might be.
So today, our mission for this deep dive is to uncover the surprising, nearly 3,000-year-old mythological origins of a word you almost certainly use all the time, which is mentor.
It's everywhere.
Right. And we are pulling our insights today from this really fascinating article titled 9 The Hidden History of the Word Mentor. The goal here is to peel back the layers of the standard everyday buzzword. We want to reveal the epic tale of war, loyalty, and literal divine intervention hiding right inside it. Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to understand what a mentor actually is, we have to look at the mechanics of how these ancient myths managed to sneak their way into our modern vocabulary in the first place.
Yeah, because the word mentor is by no means an isolated case. Our everyday language is secretly packed with ancient gods, monsters, and mythical creatures.
Right, they're hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. And you have to think about how these stories functioned before written language was widespread. They were passed down through oral traditions over hundreds of years.
So just people telling stories around a fire.
Basically, yeah. Bards would sing these massive epics. And over centuries of repetition, the characters within them became this universally understood shorthand for the very human traits they represented.
The source text actually gives us 2 really vivid examples of this process to set the stage. Let's look at the first one, which is narcissism.
Oh, a classic.
Right. If you describe someone today as a narcissist, you are talking about someone unhealthily obsessed with their own appearance or self-importance. But the ancient Greeks didn't have clinical psychology textbooks to explain that behavior.
No, they definitely did not.
Instead, they had the myth of a beautiful youth named Narcissus.
And the psychology is baked right into that narrative. I mean, Narcissus was a young man so incredibly beautiful and so profoundly vain that when he saw his own reflection in a pool of water, he couldn't tear himself away.
He just stared at himself.
He fell completely in love with a flat, unresponsive image of himself. According to the myth, he stayed at the edge of that water, entirely consumed by his own reflection, until he eventually morphed into the flower that now bears his name.
Wow. So the modern psychological concept we use today traces a direct lineage back to the tragedy of a young man who starved to death because he couldn't stop looking at himself.
Exactly. And the collateral damage of his vanity gives us a second common word, actually.
Right, the nymph. There was a mountain nymph who was hopelessly in love with Narcissus. Her name was Echo.
Right.
But because he was entirely focused on his own reflection, he ignored her completely. The myth tells us that she pined away for him in the mountains. She withered away in sadness until literally nothing was left of her physical form.
It's so tragic.
It really is. Only her voice remained, doomed to repeat the last words spoken by others.
What's fascinating here is how human language compresses incredibly complex, multi-generational epic stories into single, highly specific concepts that we just casually toss around today.
Yeah, it's like a linguistic shortcut.
Right, by turning a story of unrequited love and fading existence into the word echo, or a story of fatal vanity into narcissism, language acts as a perfectly compressed ZIP file of human experience.
Oh, I like that. A ZIP file.
Yeah. We don't need to recite the entire epic poem of the nymph and the beautiful boy every time we want to communicate the concept of sound bouncing off a canyon wall.
Nobody has time for that.
Exactly. The single word carries all that ancient, emotional, and descriptive weight right into the present moment.
It honestly changes the way you look at a dictionary. Speaking English is essentially like walking through a linguistic archaeological site.
Oh, definitely.
You think you are just using a functional everyday word to describe a bad date or a sound in a cave, but you are actually stepping on the tragic, epic remnants of a deeply magical ancient world.
That's a great way to put it.
But, it makes me wonder about the words that aren't born from tragic flaws. Like, Narcissus gives us narcissism, which is obviously a flaw.
Right.
But what about words that represent virtues or specific professional roles? Like, if Narcissus was a tragically vain youth who was the actual historical or literary figure named Mentor, does he just pop up out of nowhere to give someone career advice?
Well, to find the real mentor, the mortal man, we have to turn to the foundational texts of ancient Greece, specifically the works of Homer.
Okay, the big leagues.
Yeah. According to the source material, mentor is an Achaean. And Achaean was simply Homer's catch-all term for the ancient Greeks of the Mycenaean era. He is the son of a man named Alcimus, and his career arc in the literature is quite remarkable because it actually spans both of Homer's massive epics.
Wait, so he was around for the Trojan War?
He was. In the Iliad, which chronicles the brutal events of the Trojan War, Mentor is introduced as a close friend and attendant to the legendary warrior Achilles.
Achilles, wow.
Yeah, right from his literary inception, this character is placed in the absolute inner circle of the greatest, most invincible heroes of the age.
But if he is just hanging around in the background while Achilles is getting all the glory, how does he end up getting a modern word named after him? That doesn't seem like enough.
It isn't. His true legacy doesn't solidify until Homer's second epic, the Odyssey. This is the poem that details the agonizing 10-year return journey of Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, as he tries to get home from the ruins of Troy.
Right, the long way home.
Very long. And by the time the events of the Odyssey are fully underway, Mentor is no longer the young attendant we saw in the Iliad. He is aged into an old man, and he has become one of King Odysseus's closest and most loyal friends back on the island of Ithaca.
Which brings up a huge logistical problem for Odysseus. When he finally has to set sail to fight in the Trojan War, he is leaving behind an entire kingdom.
A kingdom with a lot of problems.
Yeah, he has an estate to manage, a very volatile political situation, and a newborn son named Telemachus. He can't just lock the front door and hope for the best for a decade.
No, the geopolitical reality of the ancient world meant an absent king was an open invitation for disaster. Odysseus needed someone he trusted implicitly to maintain his authority while he was gone.
So he turns to Mentor.
Exactly. Before he leaves, he essentially hands the keys to the kingdom to Mentor. He tasks the old man with two immense responsibilities, managing the daily running of the royal household and educating his son, the young prince Telemachus.
Okay, I have to push back on the glamour of this origin story for a second.
Oh.
Yeah, because we just talked about nymphs fading into voices and magical transformations. But Mentor, he starts as an attendant to Achilles, and then he ages into what essentially sounds like a household manager for Odysseus.
I see where you're going with this.
It feels a little less like a profound mythical calling and more like he was just the reliable guy left behind to babysit. I mean, is this mundane estate management gig really the origin of modern mentorship? It almost feels like a demotion.
Well, on the surface, I can totally see why it looks like a demotion from running with Achilles. However, scholars and classicists extrapolate heavily from Homer's writing to explain the sheer gravity of this role. You have to remember the timeline here.
Yep.
Odysseus wasn't just going away on a brief diplomatic mission. He was gone for a decade at war, and then lost at sea for another decade trying to get back. 20 years.
That is a lifetime.
It really is. Mentor effectively acted as a stand-in father for Telemachus during this massive, intensely formative absence.
So he isn't just making sure the prince does his chores.
Not at all. The stakes were absolute survival. It is the immense burden of running a royal estate in a world where rival factions are constantly looking for weakness, all while trying to raise a boy into a future king without his actual father around.
Wow, okay. That is a lot of pressure.
It requires deep wisdom, endless patience, fierce loyalty, and the ability to guide a young person's psychological development over 2 decades. That massive, sustained burden is the exact foundation for our modern association with the long-term guidance and supervision of youth.
So it really was a huge job.
Yeah. When you use the word mentor today to describe someone guiding a junior employee, you are directly referencing that stand-in father figure holding down a volatile kingdom in Ithaca.
You know, the story of a loyal old friend acting as a surrogate father under immense pressure makes total logical sense. It is a clean, straightforward explanation for where the word comes from.
It is.
But, and I know this because we are dealing with ancient Greek myth, the straightforward explanation is usually a misdirection. The mortal man, the son of Altimus, wasn't actually acting alone all those years, was he?
He most certainly was not, and this is the exact moment the history of the word takes a drastic pivot away from human resources and straight into the divine.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because there is a massive plot twist waiting in the source material. The text tells us that Mentor, the mortal old man, actually only appears a handful of times in the entire story of the Odyssey.
Right.
But in the vast majority of those appearances, it isn't the mortal old man at all. It is the goddess Athena operating in disguise.
Yeah, the Greek gods were entirely unpredictable and deeply invested in the affairs of mortals. They intervene constantly, and Athena is arguably the most critical divine player in the entire Odyssey.
But out of all the mortals on Earth, why does Athena care so much about Odysseus and his teenage son? Like, why them?
It comes down to understanding what Athena's domains actually are. She isn't just a generic deity of power. She is the goddess of war, but more specifically, the goddess of strategic war, reason, and intelligence.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because she governs those traits, she is naturally drawn to mortals who exhibit them. Odysseus is famous throughout the mythology for his honor, his bravery, and his cunning intellect. He's the ultimate strategist. I mean, he's the man who came up with the Trojan horse.
Right, the ultimate trick.
Exactly. Athena respects his mind deeply and actively wants to orchestrate his success and his safe return home.
And beyond just liking Odysseus, there is some serious divine politics at play behind the scenes here.
Oh, always.
The Greek pantheon was incredibly factional. Athena harbors a very deep, ongoing antipathy toward the sea god Poseidon, and Poseidon just happens to be Odysseus's ultimate mortal enemy, creating storms and monsters to keep the king from ever reaching Ithaca.
Poseidon made his life miserable.
He really did. So by actively helping Odysseus, Athena is also playing a proxy war against her rival. It is essentially the ancient Greek version of undercover boss.
That's actually a great comparison.
Right. Think about the mechanics of this. You have this incredibly high-level executive, an all-powerful goddess of war and wisdom, and she wants to directly influence events on the ground floor.
Yes.
But if she just materializes in the palace courtyard in all her glowing, terrifying, divine glory, the mortals are going to be paralyzed with fear. They won't learn anything. They'll just cower.
It'd be completely useless.
Exactly. So she steps into a middle management role. She puts on the mentor suit, wearing the physical disguise of this trusted old man so she can steer the ship without blowing her cover.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains the underlying psychology of why Athena chose that specific disguise out of anyone in Ithaca. She possessed the power to look like anyone or anything.
Right, she's a goddess.
But she leveraged the pre-existing, deeply rooted trust that the real mortal mentor had built over 20 years. She knew that the young prince Telemachus and the king Odysseus would listen to mentor without hesitation.
Because he'd already put in the work.
Exactly. By assuming his familiar form, she bypassed their defenses. She could deliver divine, highly strategic guidance without terrifying them or blatantly breaking the unwritten rules of divine intervention.
Which completely shatters how we usually view the concept of mentorship. Understanding that a literal goddess of war and intelligence was operating the mentor suit forces us to look at what this guidance actually looked like in practice.
It really does.
It wasn't an old man giving passive, gentle advice from a rocking chair.
No, it was the exact opposite of passive. When Athena was operating the guise of mentor, her interventions were highly active, deeply direct, and fundamentally shaped the outcomes of the epic.
The source material details some of these specific actions, and they are intense. Like early on in the story, the young Prince Telemachus is essentially paralyzed by indecision. He doesn't know if his father is dead or alive.
He's stuck.
Yeah, he's totally stuck. Athena doesn't just put a hand on his shoulder and comfort him. She actively pushes him. She basically commands him to get off the couch, leave the safety of his home, and go out into a highly dangerous world to find proof of his father's fate.
She doesn't give him a choice, really.
No. She instigates his entire coming-of-age journey. She's the catalyst for his action.
And the nature of her interventions as mentor escalates dramatically as the stakes of the poem rise. Toward the end of the epic, when Odysseus finally manages to return to Ithaca, he arrives to find his palace completely overrun.
This is the scene from the beginning.
Yes. Scores of aggressive, unwanted suitors have moved in, and they are trying to force his queen, Penelope, to marry one of them so they can steal the throne.
It is a totally desperate situation. They are eating his livestock, disrespecting his legacy, and literally plotting to murder his son.
It culminates in a climactic, incredibly violent battle in the Great Hall of the Palace. Odysseus and Telemachus are vastly outnumbered in a fight for their lives, and who shows up to aid Odysseus in this bloody, desperate combat?
Mentor.
Athena, once again wearing the disguise of mentor. She doesn't just offer moral support from the sidelines or shout tactical advice from a safe distance. She literally stands with him in the combat.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because the contrast is wild. Modern mentorship, as we experience it today, is often incredibly polite.
Usually, yes.
Right. It's giving career advice over a cup of coffee, it's reviewing a resume, or maybe explaining how to navigate office politics without making enemies.
Right, very civilized.
But this text is telling us that the original mentorship, the blueprint that birthed the very word, involved a literal war goddess shoving you out of your comfort zone into the terrifying unknown, and then physically fighting off your enemies in a bloody-to-the-death battle in your living room.
It's quite a shift.
That sets an impossibly high bar. I mean, if my modern career coach isn't willing to take up a bronze spear for me in a boardroom brawl, are they even a real mentor?
This raises an important question about how we might have diluted the concept over thousands of years. We tend to think of mentorship today as soft, passive, or purely conversational. We focus heavily on the emotional support aspect.
The coffee chats.
Right. But true mentorship, if we trace it back to this 3,000-year-old origin story, is a powerful synthesis of two distinct forces. It combines reason and profound intelligence, which are Athena's primary domains, with active, sometimes forceful participation in a struggle.
It is the wisdom of a counselor blending perfectly with the aggressive action of a warrior.
Precisely. The original mentor, or rather Athena operating as mentor, did not simply tell Telemachus what to do. She compelled his action. She didn't just advise Odysseus on battle tactics. She stood shoulder to shoulder with him in the trenches when the spears were flying.
She got her hands dirty.
She did. It demonstrates that profound guidance requires an active stake in the success and sometimes the literal survival of the person you are guiding. True mentorship isn't just words. It is having the courage to push someone to act when they are paralyzed by fear, and it is standing beside them when the pressure is absolute.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive looking at a word that feels like it belongs entirely in a corporate training manual or a university advising center. But the reality is that the notion of a thoughtful mentor or the concept of guiding youth through difficult transitions isn't some modern invention of the business world.
Not at all. It carries almost 3,000 years of profound, layered history behind it. The legacy of the word was cemented entirely by this character's appearance in the Odyssey as a learned guide and a fiercely loyal advocate.
And ultimately, it doesn't even matter if that guidance technically came from the mortal son of Alcimus, just doing his absolute best to honor an absent king, or whether it came from the fierce, brilliant goddess of war wearing his face as a tactical disguise.
The result was the same.
Exactly. The impact on the story and on our language was exactly the same. The character of mentor became the eternal symbol for that specific kind of guidance. So the next time you seek out a mentor in your own career, or when you step up to mentor someone else who is struggling to find their way, you aren't just engaging in a polite, professional courtesy.
You're stepping into big shoes.
You really are. You are participating in an ancient tradition, a tradition of loyalty, of vital education, and a fierce, active advocacy that traces its lineage right back to the rocky shores of ancient Ithaca.
It serves as a reminder that choosing to guide someone is a significant, almost sacred responsibility. It requires the wisdom to clearly see the right path and the courage to push your mentee down it, even when it is difficult.
Which leaves us with one final, kind of wild thing to think about. We've established today that the most impactful, heroic, and frankly effective moments of mentoring in the original text weren't actually done by the human guy at all.
No, they were not.
They were performed by an all-powerful deity wearing a human disguise to fix an impossible, overwhelming situation. So it makes you wonder, when you or I seek out a mentor today, when we desperately look for that perfect person to guide us through a crisis at work or in life, are we truly just looking for an experienced peer to give us logical advice? Or deep down, are we secretly hoping for a divine savior to step in, put on a disguise, and just fight our battles for us?
It is a profound psychological question to keep in mind next time you sit down to grab a coffee with your advisor.
I know, I'll be looking at them a little differently. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking for the ancient myths hiding in your everyday life.